The meeting room was completely silent. The Arab businessman spoke quickly, gesturing with his hands, but no one understood a word. Millionaire Henrique Tavares was sweating cold sweat. His commercial director, Fernando Costello, pretended to be confident, but his eyes betrayed his desperation. That's when Fernando looked at the maid serving coffee and let out a cruel laugh. How about you try translating? Henrique, nervous and out of options, went along with the joke. If you know what he said, Fabiana, I'll give you his job. The room exploded with laughter except for her. Fabiana held the coffee tray with steady hands, but her heart was racing. That Tuesday morning had begun, like all the others, at the Tavares mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Sao Paulo, waking up at 5 a.m., preparing the family's breakfast, tidying every room in the gigantic house, serving lunch, cleaning everything again, repeating, always repeating, invisible, always invisible. It had been like this for 3 years. 3 years wearing the same faded blue uniform, serving the same people who barely looked at her face. 3 years listening to conversations about international travel, imported cars, million-dollar investments, while she mentally calculated whether her monthly salary would be enough to buy her mother's medicine and still help with the household bills. But today was different. Today there was a special visitor. And Fabiana realized this early on, when Henrique Tavares, the owner of the mansion, came down for breakfast earlier than usual, nervous, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. "Is the house impeccable, Fabiana?" he asked without really expecting an answer. "Yes, Mr. Henrique," she replied as always. He didn't even look at her, just waved his hand and hurried off to his office. Khalil Mansour was not just any businessman. He was a Lebanese owner of a chain of luxury hotels in the Middle East. He had come to Brazil looking for a partner to expand his business in Latin America. Henrique Tavares, owner of a high-end construction company, desperately wanted this contract. It would be the biggest partnership in the company's history. Millions of reais, international prestige, an opportunity that would never come again. Fabiana had heard everything, not because she wanted to eavesdrop, but because when you're invisible, people talk as if you don't exist. The week before, during dinner, Henrique had mentioned the mega contract with the Arab to his wife. He talked about the numbers, the plans, the importance of making a good impression. The problem? Khalil didn't speak Portuguese and his English was too basic for complex business deals. He insisted on speaking Arabic, his mother tongue, where he felt safe to express his real intentions. Henrique knew this and blindly trusted Fernando Costello to resolve the issue. Fernando Costello, the company's commercial director, assured Henrique that everything would be under control. "I hired a top-notch interpreter, a doctor of Oriental languages. Leave it to me." He said this with that confident smile of someone who always has the right answers. Fernando was like that, charming, well-dressed, perfect white teeth, slicked back hair, the kind of man who was born knowing how to impress important people. But the interpreter canceled at the last minute with a curt message at 8 a.m., unable to attend. Sorry for the inconvenience. Fernando tried to hide his despair, pushing the meeting forward with empty conversation in English about soccer, the weather, tourism. Khalil smiled politely, but his eyes showed growing impatience. The meeting took place in the mansion's main room, the one with 6-meter ceilings, imported crystal chandeliers, and a panoramic view of the garden. Fabiana had been instructed to serve coffee and water and then discreetly disappear. She knew this role well. That's when everything fell apart. Cal settled into his armchair, took a deep breath, and began to speak in Arabic, directly without beating around the bush. His expression was serious, almost solemn. He gestured, pointing to the documents on Mogno's desk, to the windows, to his own chest. He spoke for almost 3 minutes without interruption, his deep voice filling every corner of that luxurious room. Everyone was paralyzed. Henrique looked at Fernando. Fernando looked at the floor. The other 2 executives present exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Did anyone understand anything?" Henrique asked. His voice was tense, almost a desperate whisper. Awkward silence. The kind of silence that seems to last for hours. Fernando felt sweat running down his forehead. His Italian silk tie suddenly felt too tight. He needed to do something, say something, anything to divert attention from his own colossal failure. Fernando, feeling the pressure crushing his shoulders, tried to save the situation with a bad joke. Boss, I think he's complaining about the cold coffee. A few nervous laughs echoed around the room. That's when Fernando noticed Fabiana standing near Mogno's door, empty tray in hand, watching the scene. His eyes sparkled. There was the perfect opportunity to divert attention. Hey, Fabiana, he called out in a mocking, almost childish tone. You're the one who stays here all day cleaning, listening to everything, paying attention. I bet you understood exactly what he said, didn't you? The room laughed. Even Enrique smiled weakly, relieved by any break in the unbearable tension. But Fernando didn't stop. He was enjoying the attention, the regained control. Go on, tell us. Translate what he said. You must know Arabic, right? Did you learn it from soap operas? More laughter. Fabiana felt the blood rush to her face. 26 years of humiliation flashed like a movie through her mind. The jokes about her worn-out uniform, the comments about the smell of poverty, the times her studies, her books, her notebooks were ridiculed. But she remained quiet, professional, with the upright posture her mother had always taught her. Don't give them the pleasure of seeing you broken. That's when Enrique, desperate, sweating with no way out, turned the mockery into a bet. You know what, Fernando? He said, rising from his leather chair. If Fabiana really knows what Mr. Mansour said, word for word, I'll give her your job right here and now. The room exploded in genuine laughter. Fernando laughed louder than everyone else, secure, confident. It's a deal, boss. You can write it down. Put it in the contract. He even clapped his hands as if he had already won. Khalil watched everything with a neutral expression, not understanding Portuguese, but clearly uncomfortable with the atmosphere of mockery. His dark eyes moved from one face to another, trying to decipher what was happening. He didn't like it. He didn't like being the center of a joke he didn't understand. Enrique looked at Fabiana. So, do you accept the challenge or admit that it was just a joke by Fernando? Fabiana took a deep breath. She held the empty coffee tray so tightly that her fingers were white. The metal pressed against her palms. All eyes were fixed on her. Fernando crossed his arms, legs apart, confident of his victory. Enrique waited anxiously, knowing it was just a ridiculous charade, but secretly hoping for an impossible miracle. The other executives were already taking out their cell phones, ready to film the humiliation. And Fabiana knew exactly every word Khalil Mansour had said, every syllable, every intonation, every pause, because she wasn't just a maid who cleaned, served, and disappeared. She was a woman who spoke 6 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, Italian, Mandarin, and Arabic. Classical Arabic, learned on her own during 5 years of early mornings at the municipal library, using old headphones to repeat pronunciations from free videos on the internet. She placed the tray on the sideboard delicately, as if it were fine crystal. She straightened her faded blue uniform, wiped her hands on her white apron, looked directly at Khalil, ignoring all the other faces in the room. And then, with perfect, clear pronunciation, she began to speak in Arabic. Peace be with you, Mr. Mansour, said Fabiana in perfect Arabic. The room froze. Fernando's smile vanished like smoke. Enrique's eyes widened, and Cal Mansour, for the first time since entering that mansion, smiled, 16 years earlier, in the Guayanazes neighborhood east of Sao Paulo. Fabiana was 10 when her world fell apart. It was a rainy Thursday in March. She remembered the details as if it were yesterday. The smell of filtered coffee that her mother Teresa prepared before 5 a.m. The sound of the old television turned on at low volume, her younger siblings still sleeping in the room they shared. Everything changed with a knock on the door. 2 police officers, serious expressions, caps in their hands. Are you Jose Carlos Silva's wife? Teresa already knew. Mothers always know. She held onto the doorframe, her legs buckled, but she didn't fall. Fabiana watched everything from the kitchen table, the spoon frozen in the air, an accident at work, illegal construction, a structure that collapsed. 5 workers dead. Jose Carlos was one of them. Fabiana didn't cry that day, not at the wake, not at the funeral. She just watched her mother, 7 months pregnant with her 5th child, trying to be strong. Teresa was 28 years old and had just become a widow, with no profession, no income, no prospects. 4 children to raise, another on the way, and a bank account that didn't even reach for $1,000. The world didn't stop to wait for their morning. 2 weeks later, Teresa got a job as a day laborer. She left at 4 a.m. and returned at 9 p.m. Fabiana, the eldest, became the mother of her siblings. Lucas was 8, Miguel was 7, and Beatrice was 4. And when Pedro was born in May of that year, she was the one who learned to change diapers, make bottles, and rock him to sleep. She was 10 years old. School became a luxury. Fabiana went when she could. She missed school to take care of Pedro when he was sick, to pick up her siblings from daycare when Teresa couldn't, to make food when no one else was home. The teachers complained, "That girl has no future if she continues like this." Teresa cried in secret. Fabiana pretended not to see, but she was smart, very smart. Even though she missed school, even though she studied at dawn, by candlelight when the power was out, she got the best grades in her class. Math, Portuguese, science, history. Everything made sense to her, as if her brain were a sponge, desperate for knowledge. It was at the age of book that she discovered her gift. The 8 o'clock soap opera had a French character. Fabiana was fascinated by the language, those different sounds, that strange melody. She began to repeat the phrases, imitate the accents, write down the words in an old notebook, and look up the meaning in the dictionary in the school library. In 6 months, she was able to understand entire dialogues. "You have a talent for languages," said her Portuguese teacher, Ms. Marta, a gray-haired black woman who saw potential where others saw just another poor girl. "Have you ever thought about going to college to study languages, becoming a translator?" Fabiana laughed, not out of mockery, but out of impossibility. "Teacher, I can barely finish high school. College is out of the question." But Ms. Marta didn't give up. She took Fabiana to the municipal library and showed her the language section. "With books, CDs, and DVDs. Everything here is free. You can come whenever you want." And Fabiana went every Saturday morning. While Teresa worked and her siblings stayed with the neighbor, she spent 4 hours immersed in English, Spanish, and French. At 15, she spoke 3 languages. But life doesn't wait for dreams. Teresa fell ill, advanced diabetes, high blood pressure, a body tired of carrying the weight of the world. The medicines were expensive, and her salary as a day laborer didn't cover it. Lucas, now 13, started working as a flyer delivery boy. Miguel sold candy at traffic lights. Beatrice took care of Pedro and Fabiana. Fabiana dropped out of school. She was 15 and a half. She was 6 months away from finishing high school, 6 months away from getting her diploma, but it wasn't possible. There wasn't enough money. She got a job at a bakery, then at a store, then as a nanny in a family home. Teresa cried, "My daughter, you are so smart. You deserve to study, to have a better life." "We'll be fine, Mom," Fabiana replied, holding Teresa's calloused hands. "I promise." But inside she felt an emptiness, a hole in her chest, a future that died before it began. The years passed. Fabiana worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. When she got home, she studied languages on her own, bought used books, downloaded free apps, watched videos on YouTube with headphones so as not to wake anyone up. Italian, Mandarin, Arabic. Arabic was the most difficult. Writing from right to left, guttural sounds, complex grammar, but she persisted. 5 years studying alone, without a teacher, without a course, without a certificate, just pure passion and stubbornness. At 23, she spoke 6 languages fluently, but that didn't show up on her resume because resumes want diplomas, certificates, official stamps. And Fabiana had only completed elementary school. She hadn't even finished high school. She tried for bilingual receptionist jobs, but was rejected. "You need a college degree." She tried for an international call center job and was rejected. "You need a high school diploma." She tried to be a private tutor. A few students, little money, nothing stable. Until at 26, desperate, she accepted a job as a maid in the Tavares mansion. "It's temporary," she told Teresa, "just until she saves enough money to finish her studies." 3 years later, she was still there serving coffee, cleaning rooms, invisible, but Fabiana never stopped studying. Every morning from 4 to 5:30, before starting work, she studied, improved, learned. because she knew that one day, somehow, that knowledge would be useful. She just didn't imagine that day would be today. The Tavares mansion was 100 mètres with 7 suites, 5 bathrooms, 3 living rooms, a heated pool, a tennis court, and a garden with an imported fountain. Fabiana cleaned all of this by herself. She woke up at 5 a.m. every day, including Sundays. She prepared breakfast for the family. Fresh bread, fruit cut into decorative shapes, fresh juices, scrambled eggs for Mr. Henrique, tapioca for Mrs. Marilia, pancakes for their teenage daughter, Isabella. Isabella, 17 years old. Straightened hair, always manicured nails, designer clothes, everything Fabiana never had. The girl treated Fabiana with absolute indifference, worse than indifference. Fabiana was just part of the landscape, a landscape that served, cleaned, and disappeared. Fabiana, my room is a mess. Clean it up. The order was given without looking at her face, eyes glued to her cell phone, finger pointing toward the hallway. Yes, Miss Isabella. Isabella's room looked like a hurricane had hit it. Clothes thrown on the floor, makeup scattered across the dressing table, wet towels on the double bed. Fabiana picked everything up in silence, folding each piece, organizing each object. Some clothes still had their tags on, never worn, expensive enough to pay 3 months' rent on Teresa's house. One day, Fabiana found an English book under Isabella's bed. It was untouched. Not even the first few pages had been open. The girl studied at an expensive international school. She had private lessons 3 times a week, but the book was perfect, unmarked, unused. Fabiana couldn't resist. She leafed through a few pages, basic exercises, simple dialogues, things she had mastered years ago. What are you doing? Isabella's voice cut through the air like glass. Fabiana almost dropped the book. Sorry, miss. I was just snooping through my things. Isabella snatched the book from her hands. Do you think you understand anything here? This is advanced level stuff for people who have really studied. Fabiana swallowed her anger. Sorry, it won't happen again. You'd better. Isabella threw the book on the bed and finished my room quickly. I have friends coming over later. I want everything impeccable. That happened on a Tuesday. The following Thursday, Fabiana heard Isabella crying in her room. The door was ajar. She hesitated but approached. Is everything okay, miss? Isabella quickly wiped her face. It's none of your business, but Fabiana saw the paper on the bed. English test, failing grade 3.5. Maybe I can help. The words came out before Fabiana could think. Isabella laughed, a bitter, cruel laugh. You help me with English. You barely finished school. Fabiana felt the stab, but kept her voice steady. I speak English fluently and 5 other languages. I can explain the material if you want. Get out of here, Isabella pointed to the door, and forget you saw that. Fabiana left and Isabella continued to get low grades. Mrs. Marilia, Enrique's wife, was different. She wasn't cruel, just absent. She lived between charity lunches, spa sessions, trips with her friends. She only spoke to Fabiana to give indirect orders. Fabiana, would it be possible to prepare a special dinner on Friday? We'll have guests. Fabiana, the pool towels need to be changed. Fabiana, the china in the dining room needs to be spotless. It was always possible. They need to be. They need to be. Never, please, never, thank you, as if Fabiana were an automated service, paid monthly. And Mr. Enrique Tavares, was the kind of man who sincerely believed he was generous. He paid her salary on time, gave her a Christmas hamper, allowed Fabiana to leave an hour early on Fridays. I treat my employee well, he would say to his friends. I'm not like those exploitative bosses. But Enrique didn't know Fabiana's mother's name. He didn't know she had brothers. He didn't know she was studying 6 languages. He knew nothing beyond the fact that she cleaned well, cooked well, and didn't cause any problems. Once, during a dinner with investors, Fabiana overheard the conversation in the living room while serving drinks. The problem with Brazil is that people don't want to study, said one of the guests, cigar in hand. They expect everything to be handed to them on a silver platter. Exactly, agreed Enrique. I give them opportunities, but they have to go after them. I myself started from the bottom, studied, graduated, built my empire. Fabiana held the tray tightly. Enrique started from the bottom as the son of a construction company owner. He studied at a private school, had a car at 18, but he genuinely believed in his own narrative of overcoming adversity. She poured his whiskey. He didn't even look at her face. But the worst part wasn't the direct humiliations. The worst part was the invisibility. Fabiana could be in the room and they would talk about intimate matters as if she didn't exist. The company's financial problems, family fights, extramarital affairs, everything exposed in front of her as if she were a wall. One afternoon, Marilia was talking on the phone with her friend, whining about the previous maid who stole a blouse. I know it was her, dear. An expensive blouse disappeared. I looked everywhere. Fabiana was cleaning the bookshelf. Marilia didn't lower her voice. She didn't care. I had to fire her on the spot. You can't trust her, you know? Now this new one seems honest, but who knows? Fabiana continued cleaning as she always did, as she had always been taught to do. On Thursdays, Fernando Costello, the commercial director, would go to the mansion for meetings with Enrique. He treated Fabiana with constant disdain. So, Fabiana, have you gotten the hang of reading yet? He would say, laughing at his own joke. Or else, be careful not to break anything. These glasses cost more than your annual salary. Enrique laughed along without any real malice, just out of social habit. Fernando loved an audience. Once Fabiana served coffee during an important meeting. Fernando was presenting results to investors. She stumbled slightly without spilling anything, but Fernando didn't miss the chance. Careful there, Fabiana. If you break anything, you'll have to pay for it. Oh, I forgot. You can't afford to pay for it. Laughter filled the room. Fabiana apologized and left. But before closing the door, she heard Fernando continue. That's the problem with hiring without formal qualifications. Lack of preparation. 3 years like this, 1,095 days, being treated as invisible. But Fabiana never complained, never responded, never showed anger. Because she needed that job. Because her mother needed medicine. Because her brothers needed to eat. She just woke up at 5 a.m., cleaned the mansion, served the family, studied in the early hours of the morning, and slept late. She repeated, always repeated until that Tuesday, until the meeting, until the Arab businessman, until the bet, until the moment she stopped being invisible, back in the meeting room. Peace be with you, Mr. Mansour, said Fabiana in perfect Arabic. Fabiana's voice cut through the silence in the room like a sharp blade, clear, firm, perfect. Cal Mansour's eyes widened. Enrique froze, his mouth half open. Fernando Costello felt the floor disappear beneath him. The other executives dropped their cell phones. Marilia, who was entering at that moment with more coffee, stopped halfway. Fabiana continued, in fluent Arabic, with impeccable pronunciation. You said you were disappointed with this meeting. She translated her own words from Arabic into Portuguese, alternating between languages, saying that he expected professionalism but found disorganization, that the lack of an interpreter showed disrespect for his time and his culture. Khalil slowly rose from his chair, his eyes fixed on Fabiana. He couldn't believe it. Not in that mansion. Not coming from that woman in a faded blue uniform. Fabiana took a deep breath and continued, translating every word Cal had said minutes before. You said that trust is the basis of any partnership, and that a company that does not prepare adequately for an international meeting raises serious questions about its ability to execute. You questioned whether you should really invest millions in a partnership with people who don't even master the basics of intercultural communication. With each sentence, Fernando felt sweat dripping down his forehead. Enrique had gone from shock to something close to controlled panic. Those words were devastating. Khalil was one step away from giving up on the deal, and no one, absolutely no one but Fabiana, had understood. She continued relentlessly. You mentioned that you received proposals from 3 Brazilian companies, and that so far this was the least prepared. You said you would give us only 10 more minutes to present something concrete, or you would end the meeting and move on to the next partner? Enrique closed his eyes. 10 minutes. They had 10 minutes, and no one knew it. Fabiana then translated the last part, the most important part. You explained that your project is to build 5 luxury resorts on the Brazilian coast over the next 3 years, with an initial investment of $80 million, but that you need a partner who understands Lebanese hospitality protocols, who respects your cultural specifications, who speaks literally absolute silence. Kil looked at Fabiana as if he had seen a miracle. He took 2 steps toward her and asked in Arabic, "Where did you learn my language?" Fabiana replied, also in Arabic, "On my own, sir. Books, videos, a lot of dedication, 5 years studying every night." 5 years? Khalil smiled, genuinely impressed, continuing in Arabic. "Your pronunciation is better than that of many university students I know. Did you study in Lebanon? In Saudi Arabia?" "No, sir," she replied in Arabic. "I studied at the Guyana's Municipal Library and in my room after work." Khalil nodded emotionally. He turned to Henrique and spoke in basic English. "This woman, she's incredible. Where did you find her?" Henrique blinked, trying to process. "She works here in the house. She works here." Cal frowned in confusion. "Is she a translator?" "No, she is." Henrique swallowed hard, looked at Fabiana, then at Fernando, who was pale, sweating, his hands shaking. "She is our employee." It took Khalil a few seconds to understand. When he did, his expression changed. It wasn't anger, it was deep disappointment. He spoke again in Arabic, directly to Fabiana. "Are you a domestic worker?" "Yes, sir," she replied in Arabic. "And you speak 6 languages?" "Yes, sir, 6 languages." "And you work cleaning houses?" His voice carried disbelief. "Why?" Fabiana hesitated, but only for a second. "Because I don't have a diploma, sir. I couldn't finish high school. I had to work early to help my family. The market doesn't hire based on real knowledge. It hires based on papers," she explained in Arabic. Cal closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was something different in them. Respect, admiration, and anger. Not at her, but at the waste, the system, the injustice. He turned to Henrique and said in slow but firm English, "This woman speaks 6 languages." "6, and you? Do you make her clean houses?" Henrique tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled. "I didn't know, no one knew. She never said. She needs to say." Cal raised his voice. "You never asked. You never saw." Fernando tried to intervene, his voice failing. "Mr. Mansour, I can explain." Cal cut him off sharply, returning to Arabic, looking at Fabiana. "Was it this man who mocked you?" Fabiana nodded. "Yes, sir. The same man who guaranteed there would be an interpreter and failed completely." "Yes, sir." Khalil turned to Fernando, and even without understanding Arabic, Fernando knew he was being criticized at that moment. Khalil spoke quickly, gesturing firmly. He pointed at him, at Fabiana, at Enrique. Fabiana translated simultaneously into Portuguese so that everyone could understand. "This man represents everything that is wrong with the corporate world. Arrogance without competence, empty promises, and worse, disrespect for those who are most vulnerable. How can I entrust my company to people like this?" Fernando sank into his chair. Henrique was paralyzed. Cal continued, and Fabiana translated. "I built my fortune by respecting people, every single person. My first employees still work with me. I know each of their names, I know their stories, and I would never, ever allow anyone to be treated with disrespect in my presence." He paused, took a breath, switched back to English, and looked directly at Henrique. "You made a promise. You said so. If she knows what I said, she gets his job." He pointed to Fernando. "Yes." Henrique was sweating. He looked at Fernando, looked at Fabiana, looked at the executives witnessing everything. "I did say that." Then Cal crossed his arms. "Are you a man of your word or a man of jokes?" The whole room waited. Marilia let out a shocked sigh. Isabella, who was watching everything from the stairs, widened her eyes. Fernando raised his hands in despair. "Henrique, you can't be serious. It was a joke, a prank. You can't." "Silence, Fernando." Henrique's voice cut through the air. He had never spoken to his director like that, but at that moment, for the first time in 3 years, he really saw Fabiana. He saw the woman who served him coffee every morning, who took care of his house, whom he had never looked in the eye. And she spoke 6 languages. 6. And he had never asked. Henrique Tavares was not a man to hesitate. He had built an empire by making quick decisions, sometimes risky, but always firm. But at that moment, for the first time in decades, he didn't know what to do. The entire room was watching him. Cal Mansour, arms crossed, waited. Fernando Costello, sweating, fidgeted nervously with his hands. The executives held their breath. Marilia had her hand over her mouth. And Fabiana just waited with the same calm demeanor as of always, as if she already knew the outcome. Henrique, Fernando began, his voice trembling. You can't do this. I've been working with you for 8 years. 8 years. I've built half of this company's contracts. You can't fire me because of a joke. Joke? Cal's voice cut through the air. He understood the Portuguese word. Piada. You call that a joke? Fernando turned to Khalil, desperate. Senator Mansour, please understand. It was a tense moment. I didn't mean to offend anyone. It was just, you lied. Cal interrupted him bluntly. You lied about the translator. You didn't prepare yourself. You made a joke about the woman. Now you're lying again. He pointed to the door. You're the problem. Fernando felt his world collapse. He looked at Henrique, at the executives, seeking support, but found only averted gazes. No one was going to defend him. Not after everything that had happened, not in front of the Millionaire-ish partner he had just almost lost. Henrique closed his eyes, thought quickly, thought about numbers. $80 million, the biggest contract in the company's history, the chance to expand internationally. Everything depended on that decision. Everything depended on one man keeping a promise made in jest. But it wasn't just that. Henrique thought about how many times he had passed Fabiana in the hallways without looking at her. How many intimate conversations he had had in front of her as if she were a ghost. How many opportunities he had missed to get to know the person who cleaned his house. 6 languages, self-taught, studying in the early hours of the morning. And he never asked her full name. He opened his eyes, looked at Fabiana, really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw her. Fernando, he said in a low but firm voice, you're fired. The silence that followed was deafening. Fernando staggered. What, Henrique? No, you can't. I can, and I am. Henrique raised his hand. You lied about the interpreter. You almost ruined this company's biggest deal. And worse, you disrespected an employee in front of everyone. That's no way to represent my company. But Henrique, gather your things. Human Resources will contact you about the arrangements. Henrique looked away. He couldn't face Fernando anymore. You may leave. Fernando stood still, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. For a moment, it looked like he was going to explode, scream, make a scene, but then he looked around and saw Callie standing impassively. He saw the executives avoiding his gaze. He saw Marilia with a disapproving expression. He saw Isabella on the stairs filming everything with her cell phone. And he saw Fabiana, quiet, serene, victorious. He felt Billy rise in his throat. You're going to regret this, he spat out the words. All of you. And he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The noise echoed through the mansion, then silence again. Enrique turned to Fabiana. She was still standing, hands crossed in front of her body, uniform impeccable, waiting. Fabiana, he cleared his throat. A promise is a promise. The position of commercial director is yours, if you accept. She blinked once, twice, as if she needed to confirm that she had heard correctly. Mr. H. Rick, I don't have the training for you. You speak 6 languages. He cut her off. You just saved an $80 million contract. You have more real competence than any diploma can prove. He paused. Do you accept? Fabiana looked at Khalil. He smiled and nodded in approval. She looked at Marilia, who seemed shocked but not opposed. She looked at the executives who were waiting for her answer. I accept. Khalil clapped his hands once loudly. Good, very good, he said in English. He approached Fabiana and extended his hand. Now we can talk business. Real business? Yes, Fabiana shook his hand, firm, confident. Cal turned to Henrique. We sit, we talk, she translates. A real professional meeting. Yes, of course. Henrique pointed to the table. Please, sit down. Everyone settled in. Fabiana, for the first time in 3 years, sat at the table, no longer standing, serving coffee, but sitting as an equal. Khalil began to speak in Arabic, and Fabiana translated simultaneously with surgical precision. Mr. Mansour says that his resort project in Brazil needs someone who understands both cultures, someone who can bridge the gap between Lebanese hospitality protocols and the Brazilian market. He had been looking for this person for months. Khalil nodded and continued. He says that the resorts will be geared toward Lebanese and Middle Eastern visitors to Brazil, Families seeking privacy, luxury, and respect for cultural traditions, specific menus, prayer spaces, family areas, all while maintaining Brazilian standards of hospitality. Henrique listened attentively, taking notes. For the first time, he fully understood Khalil's vision. He needs a partner who can build with quality, but also someone internally who can manage cultural specifications. Someone who speaks Arabic, understands his needs, and can coordinate Brazilian teams. Cal paused, looked at Fabiana, and said something that made her eyes widen. She translated his slightly trembling voice. Mr. Mansour asked if I would accept to work directly for him as well, as the project's cultural relations manager, with a salary in dollars, paid housing, and international health insurance. The entire room held its breath. Henrique felt a tightness in his chest. He had just promoted her and now he was going to lose her. But Khalil continued speaking and Fabiana translated. He says he doesn't want to take me away from this company. I want a partnership. I would work part-time for each company. I would be the official bridge between the Tavares Construction Company and the Mansour Group. Cal reached out his hand to Henrique. Partnership, a real partnership, with real people, he said in English. Henrique shook his hand. Partnership, he repeated. And then something unexpected happened. Cal turned to Fabiana and said, in slow but correct Portuguese, inspiration, your story, I want to tell it. May I? Fabiana hesitated. Tell it, yes, in my hotels. Your story. A woman who studies 6 languages on her own, who never gives up, who wins with knowledge. He smiled. Good story, inspires others. Can I? Tears welled up in Fabiana's eyes. For the first time since she had entered that room, she felt emotion rise. Can I, Mr. Mansour? You can. Cal nodded with satisfaction, then looked at his watch. Now let's talk numbers, investments, deadlines. Yes, yes. Henrique replied and the meeting continued. But now it was different. Now there was real communication, real respect. And Fabiana, the invisible woman, was the center of it all. 2 hours later, when Callie said goodbye, the contract was signed. $80 million, 5 resorts, 3 years of construction. And Fabiana had 2 jobs, a future, and a silent revenge that was worth more than gold. 3 months later, the news spread through the company like wildfire. Fernando Costello, the untouchable commercial director, had been fired and his position given to the maid who cleaned her boss's house. The next morning, when Fabiana arrived at the headquarters of the Tavares Construction Company, all eyes turned to her. Whispers filled the corridors, some of admiration, others of envy, many of pure shock. She was no longer wearing her blue uniform. She wore a simple business suit bought in a hurry the day before. Nothing luxurious but dignified. Flat shoes, hair tied back in a bun. The same Fabiana, but different. Henrique was waiting for her at the reception desk. Good morning, Fabiana Recia. Ready for your first day? Good morning, Mr. Henrique. Ready? He took her through the floors, introduced her to the departments. This is Fabiana Silva, our new commercial director. She will be responsible for the partnership with the Mansour Group and for new international contracts. The reactions varied. Some shook her hand firmly, respectfully. Others barely concealed their disdain. An executive in high heels and a red suit looked Fabiana up and down and whispered to her colleague, "She doesn't even have a college degree. How can she be a director?" Fabiana heard, but didn't respond. She was used to it. Henrique showed her her new office. It wasn't Fernando's, but it was large with a view of Paulista Avenue, a glass desk, and a new computer. On the door was a sign, Fabiana Silva, International Commercial Director. Her documents were being processed. Contract signed, registration in her work card, salary deposited at the end of the month. Henrique paused. The amount is 23 times what you earned in your previous job. 23 times. Fabiana sat down in the swivel chair, ran her hand across the glass table, looked out the window. Sao Paulo below, bustling, noisy, immense. She had worked in this city since she was 15, always looking up, always serving, always invisible. Now she was on the 15th floor at the top. "Henrique," she said, turning to him, "can I ask you a question?" Sure, why did you really do it? Was it just because of Khalil's contract? Henrique hesitated, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. At first, yes, it was strategy. I couldn't lose $80 million. He sighed, but when I saw his reaction, when I heard his words, I realized something. What? That I'm an idiot. He laughed without humor. You worked in my house for 3 years. 3 years, Fabiana. I never asked you anything about yourself, never wanted to know. You were just the cleaning lady. He shook his head. Cal saw your value in 3 minutes. I had 3 years and I was blind. Fabiana didn't know what to say. My daughter Isabella came to me last night. Henrique continued crying. She said you had offered to help her with English and she was rude. She told you to shut up. He looked at Fabiana. Why did you never tell me about the languages, about your intelligence? Because no one ever asked. Fabiana replied simply, and when you're invisible, you learn to keep quiet. Henrique swallowed hard. I apologize for myself, for my family, for Fernando, for everything. I accept your apology. I hope you don't hold a grudge, Fabiana thought. Grudge? She had felt anger, of course. Humiliation every day, the urge to give up countless times. But resentment was a luxury she could never afford. Resentment didn't pay the bills. I don't hold a grudge, Henrique. I hold lessons. He nodded. Will you be okay? I know you will. He left and Fabiana was alone in the room. Her room. She picked up her cell phone and called her mother. Hello? Teresa's voice sounded tired. Mom, it's me. Fabiana, are you okay, honey? Did you get time off? Mom, I'm not a maid anymore. Silence on the other end. What do you mean, sweetie? Were you fired? No, Mom, I got promoted. Fabiana felt the tears coming. I'm a director now, a commercial director. My salary, Mom, is 23 times higher. Teresa sobbed. What? Fabiana, are you kidding me? No, Mom, it's true. It happened yesterday. I spoke Arabic at an important meeting. I saved a contract, and my boss kept his promise. Teresa cried on the other end. She cried and laughed at the same time. My daughter became a director. Dear Jesus, Mom, you'll be able to stop working. I'll pay all the bills, the medicine. I'll put Lucas, Miguel, and Beatrice in a better school. Pedro will have everything he needs. Fabiana wiped away her tears. And you, Mom, you'll be able to rest. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. They talked for 20 minutes. Fabiana told her everything. The meeting, the Arab businessman, Fernando getting fired, Cal's proposal. Teresa listened through tears and exclamations of disbelief. Your father would be so proud, Teresa said, her voice breaking. So proud, Fabiana. When she hung up, Fabiana took a deep breath, looked at the computer screen. She had work to do, contracts to study, projects to understand, a position to honor. She didn't have a degree. She didn't have an MBA. She didn't have an important surname. But she had knowledge. She had effort. She had years of invisibility that taught her to observe, listen, and learn, and she had a chance. 3 days later, Fernando showed up. Fabiana was leaving the building when she saw him. He was leaning against a car with his arms crossed. When he saw her, he walked toward her. Fabiana. She stopped and looked at him. Fernando was different. Unshaven, sunken eyes, wrinkled suit. The arrogance was gone. In its place was exhaustion. Can I talk to you? Just a minute. Fabiana looked around. Executives hurried by. Some looked on with curiosity. You have 30 seconds, she said. Fernando took a deep breath. I deserved it. I know I deserved it. I was arrogant, cruel, and incompetent. He looked at the ground. I lost everything, my reputation, my job. My apartment is about to be repossessed by the bank. Fabiana said nothing. I'm not asking for my job back. I know that won't happen. He stared at her. But can I ask you one thing? Don't destroy me. Don't spread the word about what happened. I need to start over. I need a chance. Fabiana tilted her head. Fernando, I never intended to destroy you. You did that yourself, I know. What about spreading it around? I don't need to. You took care of that yourself. Isabella filmed everything. It's been on the internet since yesterday. It already has 500,000 views. Fernando closed his eyes. I saw it. So you know, I'm not the one who's going to affect your reputation. Your choices already did that. He waved his hand in defeat. You're right. He turned to leave, but stopped. You've always deserved this chance. I'm sorry I didn't see that before. Fabiana watched him leave. Shoulders slumped, slow steps, a broken man. She felt no pleasure, no victory, only relief. The cycle was over. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Khalil. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow. Simultaneous translation guaranteed. Let's finalize the details for the first resort. The reply came in seconds. Perfect. You're excellent. Your mother knows that. Fabiana smiled. Now she knows. She put her phone away and walked to the subway. She didn't have a car yet. She didn't have a driver. She didn't have luxuries, but she had dignity. And that was finally enough. 6 months later, Fabiana parked her car in front of her mother's house. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. Bought with her first salary as a director. The house was also new, 3 bedrooms in a decent neighborhood with a backyard and garage. Teresa no longer needed to live in a rental. She no longer needed to wake up at 4 a.m. Mom, Fabiana entered carrying bags. Teresa appeared from the kitchen, a smile on her face. At 52, she looked rejuvenated, with no worry lines, no dark circles from exhaustion, just peace. Lucas came in from the living room, now 16, wearing his new private school uniform. Miguel appeared with a math book. Beatrice came down the stairs wearing headphones. Fabiana, I got first place on the English test, and Pedro, the youngest, 6 years old, ran into her arms with a colorful drawing. A family, all together, all smiling. Fabiana sat down at the table with them. The house smelled like home, like a new beginning. How's work, daughter? Teresa asked. Intense, but good. Fabiana poured herself a cup of coffee. We closed the deal on the second resort last week. Khalil is satisfied, and I'm learning a lot. That afternoon, Fabiana had an important personal meeting. She arrived at the Guyanaz's Municipal Library, the same building where she had spent entire Saturdays studying languages on her own. Dona Marta, her former teacher, was waiting for her at the entrance. Fabiana, my girl. They hugged. Inside the library, about 30 young people were waiting. Teenagers from the community, all with the same look Fabiana had years ago, hungry for knowledge and lacking opportunities. Fabiana had created a project, Language Bridges. Every Saturday, she came to the library to teach languages for free. The goal was to prepare young people from the suburbs for the international job market. Good afternoon, everyone, Fabiana began. My name is Fabiana Silva. I grew up here in this neighborhood. I studied in this library, and I want to tell you a story. The young people listened in silence as she recounted her journey. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. But I had one thing, knowledge. And no one can take knowledge away from you. She looked each one in the eye. You are here because you want more, because you know you deserve more, and I'm going to help you get it. A girl raised her hand. She couldn't have been more than 15 years old. Yes. Do you think we have a chance? Like a real chance? No college, nothing. What's your name? Jessica. Jessica, I'm going to be honest with you. It's going to be hard, really hard. You'll face prejudice. You'll hear no 1,000 times. She paused. But if you keep studying, if you become irreplaceable at what you do, someone somewhere will see your value. It may take time, but it will happen, the class continued. Fabiana taught basic English phrases. The young people repeated, took notes, asked questions. Hope. That was it. Collective hope. When she finished, Mrs. Marta approached her. You are changing lives, Fabiana. I'm trying to give back, teacher. You did it for me, and now I do it for others. The cycle continues. 2 weeks later, Fabiana received an unexpected message. It was from Isabella. Fabiana, can we talk? They met at a cafe. Isabella arrived looking different, without heavy makeup, her hair natural, dressed simply. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Isabella began in a low voice. What do you want, Isabella? To truly apologize. She looked at her hands. I was horrible to you, arrogant, rude. Isabella wiped away a tear. After what happened, my father changed. He forced me to go to therapy, to rethink things. I passed the entrance exam. I'm going to study literature. I want to be like you. Fabiana felt compassion. Isabella, you don't have to be like me. You have to be the best version of yourself. Will you forgive me? I already have, Isabella sobbed. Can I participate in your project at the library? I want to help. Fabiana smiled. Saturday, 3 p.m. Come by. Isabella showed up and kept showing up. The first resort was inaugurated. It was a huge success. Fabiana was promoted again to Vice President of International Relations, but she continued to live simply, continued teaching on Saturdays, continued being Fabiana a year later. Fabiana was in her office when she received the call. Miss Silva, this is the Federal University. We would like to invite you to give a lecture on the topic of success beyond the diploma. She smiled. I accept. That night, Fabiana returned home, called her mother, talked to her brothers, thanked them, and before going to sleep, she opened the old notebook where she had written down Arabic words when she was 15. On the first page was written, "One day this will be worth it." She picked up a pen and wrote underneath, "It was worth it because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It wasn't about hatred. It was about opportunity. It wasn't about proving herself to others. It was about proving herself to herself." Fabiana Silva no longer needed to be invisible. She was finally seen. How many Fabianas do you think there are out there? Invisible people with enormous talent, just waiting for a chance to shine. This story is not just about her, it's about everyone who continues to study, even when they're tired, about those who believe that knowledge can still change the world. If you believe that too, leave your like, write in the comments, "I see the invisible," and share it to remind the world to look beyond uniforms.